All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Representative McCullough has silently turned the gavel over to me. He doesn't have anything to say at this point, which is somewhat shocking, but yes. So just a couple of ground rules. I'll tell you the marching order, the pecking order here. The main purpose of this interim study is to look at the judicial and district attorney districts. So if you're not here for that, you're in the wrong room. What I plan on doing is have the judiciary talk about the districts and sort of the layout and how the money's dispersed and some of the requirements and qualifications. And at that point, we will have the District Attorney's Council make a presentation. Obviously, I'm sure that there will be members who have questions. There are three people, obviously on title in this interim studies, myself, Representative Biggs, who I assume will make his grand entrance here shortly, and Representative Loring. Obviously, I will defer to them with questions first, if they have them, given that their names are on this interim study. Outside of that, if you speak, please state who you are and what you do so people in the room know. And secondly, outside of the judiciary, spokesperson, and district attorneys, I would ask if anybody else would like to speak, come up over here and talk to Mr. Maxey. And the reason why I say that is because we consolidated this down to 2 hours, vice 3, so I don't know how much time we'll have. So if you want to speak, let him know that you want to speak and who you are and what you want to talk about. And then at the end, once the members, and we've had our presentations from the two entities, then we will allow people some time to go before the mic. Obviously, I will set time limitations so we don't get out of hand and the people who want to speak don't get the opportunity. And like I said, I'm doing that because we only have 2 hours to do so. Outside of that, I guess I would ask Governor Askins to come up first and talk to us about the judiciary.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all today. Let me get my stuff out here. And also, you may have members in their offices listening in, and so thank you all for letting us talk today. As you all know, just a little over a year ago, I had the opportunity to come to the position that I have now as Administrative Director of the courts. And in that time, it's been an opportunity for me to relearn some things that I used to know a long time ago when I was previously a member of the judicial branch. And it's been an opportunity for me to learn some things that I did not know before, specifically as it relates to some of the governance issues that the Supreme Court has over we call it the superintending authority, over the district courts in the state of Oklahoma. What we provided at the request of House staff and your chairman was the fiscal year 2016 caseloads, and on the far left of that is the judges per the 26 judicial districts in the state of Oklahoma. And we listed each county under each judicial district that they are in. Now, I would tell you that the numbers on this form come from the reports that your elected court clerks send to us. So that information for all of those areas are what are included there. However, on the sheet that we have given you, for caseload purposes, I made the decision to not include three categories that the court clerk does send to us. They send to us a list that includes all marriage licenses. They send to us a list that includes the numbers for all other licenses, which could be bingo or beer or other stuff. And we took off traffic tickets because I figured, if it was my presumption that if you all were looking at true caseload studies, certainly licenses did not require much time in the courtroom. And the number of traffic tickets that are filed in a particular county can really skew the numbers if you live on an interstate highway, but maybe you're in a low populated county. And so to be more accurate about the cases that require the most time in the courtroom, I took those 3 categories off, but I can certainly provide them if you wish. You will notice that we broke it down by total judges and then listed the number of district, associate, and special judges that appear. So you can follow that per county, and then you can also see a total as it relates to the 26 judicial districts. One of the other things that I have learned is that I knew that the Chief Justice provided an annual report as required by law that lists cases pending, disposed, etc. What I didn't know is that annually the Chief Justice is required to make a recommendation to the legislature whether or not there is a need to alter any of the judicial districts or whether or not there is a need to add district judges. It's pretty specific about that in the statute. For the last 3 or 4 years, the recommendation has been no, do not add, do not change. But I can tell you that the court has taken that role very seriously because it wasn't that long ago, and I believe it may have been while Justice Taylor was the Chief Justice. The report indicated that we needed to move a district judge from a county that had 2 district judges, but the caseload didn't really merit needing 2 district judges anymore, and move it to a county, a location whose caseload was growing and clearly had a need for that FTE slot. And so a number of years ago, the court recommended that one of the district judge positions in Seminole County not be filled in Seminole County, and that FTE be moved to Cleveland County because that's where the need was. Based upon the recommendation of the Chief Justice, the legislature followed through and made that change. We are doing the same thing this year with the cooperation of the governor's office. We had asked the governor's office not to send one vacancy to the Judicial Nominating Commission. Okmulgee County currently has 2 district judges, an associate and a special. Based on the caseload need, we have asked not to fill that vacancy in Okmulgee County. The senator's aware of that. And so this is not a surprise to him. And we are looking at where we believe that not only does the caseload merit it, but also where do the county commissioners have space in their courthouse where that district judge could be added. Although I'm not writing the letter and I'm not the one who signs the letter, right now we believe that our first preference is to move that position to Canadian County. The one district judge there, you may see that they have multiple specials, but they have limited jurisdiction. There are only so many things that a special judge can really hear. And the need for additional district judge authority, we believe that our priority should be really is Canadian County. So that is what I believe our proposal will be, but I can tell you that, and I want to assure you that the Supreme Court takes very seriously its responsibility in making sure that our caseloads match up with where the resources can be provided. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Governor. A couple questions I have. You were talking about the caseloads. It really boils down to numbers. So when you're comparing Okmulgee County to Canadian County, what is, to your knowledge, the average caseload of a judge in Okmulgee versus Canadian?
Well, let me just look at that, because I could tell you that I had it by judicial district. So I can tell you that for Canadian County, the average caseload is about 1,440. And so if you take that and then you look at Okmulgee County, which has 4 judges divided into 4,300 cases, you can see it's just a little over 1,000. So.
And is Canadian County at the high end of caseload? I mean, what is really the high end of?
Well, Oklahoma and Tulsa County have a pretty high number. Theirs averages about 1,800 or 1,900, I think, as I divided it up. So they're pretty high up there. There are some others that we think if we get vacancies in the future, we have a number 2 area that we think we need to look at, and that would be Logan-Payne County. Logan County specifically has need. And what you will notice is, I would tell you, and I kind of noticed this in my previous position at DHS, I think that Canadian County and Logan County are really where Cleveland County was 20 years ago. And that as the population tries to, ripples out from Oklahoma City, Canadian County, the eastern side of Canadian County, is just booming. And as I recall, at one point, District Attorney Mike Fields told me that the largest municipality in his district attorney district is that part of Oklahoma City that is in Canadian County. So you can see how that the population has put pressure then on that court system as well. The same is true going north of Waterloo Road, moving into Logan County. So we're trying to look down the road and target those areas that we think are currently showing that growth and need.
If you were to shuffle judges logistically, how would that happen, and what's the time frame?
Great question. What I would suggest, well, first of all, we believe that the Chief Justice needs to ask for it and indicate that that's what the court wishes. Because the district lines are spelled out in statute, then we would hope that the legislature would follow the recommendation of the court and allow us to move that FTE to Canadian County at a time to be filled. That position can be filled either by appointment or by election.
So if it was by appointment, I assume it could be done sooner than by election. Is that accurate?
The next judicial election would be 2018.
So when would that judge be seated?
That judge would be seated January of 19.
And then if we go the other route, what's the time frame?
It would depend on when the numbers, how many other vacancies were being filled by the Judicial Nominating Commission, but it's been averaging around 6 months, I would say.
And I have just one final question, maybe a couple. See if any of the members have questions. Each one of these judicial districts obviously is a chunk of your budget. How is your budget laid out? And so you have, we'll just take District 1, has a total of 5 judges. How would that budget compare to District 2, which has a total of 7 judges? Is it pretty set by the salary of the judges, or are there other expenses within those districts that make that budget wobble one way or the other?
You know, from the court standpoint, those particular 2 areas that you mentioned, the court's expenses are really fixed as it relates to salaries. And in the district court budget, I think it's 98 or 99.2%. I kind of forgot. Is it 99, Marilyn? Yeah, over 99% of the district court's budget is salary. So the salaries of a court reporter, of a secretary bailiff, and of the judge are fixed cost. I would tell you that in District 1 and Harper, Judicial District 1, I think they only have 1 or maybe 2 court reporters. They may just have like 1 and share 1 sometimes. It's very hard to get court reporters up in the Panhandle. The same thing happens in District 3. District 3, yes, Harmon County. I can't remember. I don't have that sheet with me. How many reporters are in that judicial district? There has been 1 in Tillman County. I know there's at least 1. There's probably 2 in Jackson County. But I know Harmon County gets a court reporter on Tuesday. So if the associate district judge there has a hearing that needs a record, it's on Tuesday.
Is there any cost sharing? So, for instance, bailiffs, are all the bailiffs employed by the district courts, or do the counties chip in? How does that work?
The bailiffs are paid by the district court. There may be, I think right now that's probably all true. There are some cases where perhaps a county may have had a long-standing agreement, and maybe in exchange for some costs that are typically borne by the county, there may be a sharing arrangement between the county and the courts. But by and large, I would tell you almost I think there's one or two exceptions as it relates to the secretary bailiff. Not every judge has a secretary bailiff, and certainly not every judge has a court reporter. We tried to set it up a number of years ago when I sat in your seats here, where especially in those far western counties that the court reporters would really be assigned to like the presiding judge, so that the presiding judge or the chief judge in a large district could help send those reporters where they were needed.
Does any other members have any questions? Representative Perriman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You had mentioned one aspect of assessing where the need was, that some associate district judges did not have, or special judges did not have the jurisdictional limits that the district or the associate might have. Have you looked at that? I mean, is that a possibility of possibly increasing the jurisdictional limit through legislature to as another way of maybe balancing?
I would tell you that that has occurred several times since the time I was a special judge. And what I would be cautious about is that as you travel in the county, sometimes these areas that may have two special judges, you learn that one of them truly handles like drug court. And so not only do the special judges handle small claims, which as the amount keeps getting higher for small claims, you can tell this is a bias of mine. The numbers of small claims cases get larger, and if there's only one special judge in the county, the special judge is handling them, or the associates handling them in our very lower populated counties. But we also have situations as it relates to an associate district judge in some counties, like Canadian County is out at the juvenile center, and the caseload on the juvenile court out there may not look that high to you all, but I know that those juvenile cases represent numerous multiple hearings that are much larger than the numerical number that appears on your report. And so Judge Huey is busy all day, 5 days a week, pretty much handling every kind of case that deals with juveniles. So he doesn't have the ability to step in and do some things that normally go on in Canadian County. Now with Judge Miller's retirement, and the JNC is in the process has taken applications for that position, one of the benefits is that Oklahoma County is part of that same judicial administrative district, and so they are able to send some of their resources over to help cover those things that a special judge and Judge Huey cannot. And sometimes we use a retired judge.
Representative Biggs, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, ma'am, for being here. And in looking at these numbers, and I know there's a lot more than looking just in paper. You've been on the bench, and now you're in this new role. Do you think the courts are operating as efficiently as possible? And given the number of different type of caseloads, and in your new role now, do you think the courts are operating as efficiently as possible right now?
I certainly think they have been the last 12 months. Thank you for setting that up. No, I would tell you, if since in the last 2.5 years, we have a brand new interim director of MIS, which I think your chairman of the committee will tell you has made a lot of difference and progress that's been made. The deputy director's position was changed into a chief financial officer. And so for 2.5 years now, I believe Marilyn has been holding that position. And now they have a new AOC director. And so I would tell you that with those 3 new positions, that there have been, we're in meetings weekly, our exec team, and I have constantly heard of areas where the MIS department is shaving costs by looking at licenses that may not be needed anymore for software, and how we can do things cheaper, less expensive, but still get the same product. So we're looking at ways we can consolidate costs there. When your budget is 99.2% payroll, there's not a lot of places that get cut. And I think what you saw as an assistant district attorney, and you may hear now, a lot of that falls back onto our court clerks, who don't get fully funded by their county commissioners, and so they have to rely on what the percent that they get off of court costs that are collected.
Follow up.
And in visiting with judges around the state, not just in my district, it comes up several times, the comparison of caseloads. Each judge, for the most part, feels like they may be overworked compared to their neighbor down the street. Do you think the caseloads right now are fairly equal, spread out across the judicial districts?
If you just look at numbers, that's really hard to be able to tell, because clearly the metropolitan areas are going to have more cases. And as long as the Constitution requires us to have an associate district judge in all 77 counties to be available for those emergency hearings that you never know when might occur, whether it's mental health or someone in jail that has a right to have bail set, or juvenile cases that need immediate attention, sometimes that makes those less populated counties look like their numbers are a little off compared to everyone else. But again, when you look at a divorce case, and an example was given to me today, you can't track how many hearings or how many times a single divorce case may keep you in court. It may be a case that was filed in 16? So let's say 2006. So 10 years ago, a case was filed when a child of the marriage was a toddler, and there may have been motions to modify either custody or support every year since then, and those hearings may have taken more than one day each time. So that number only shows up once as the year it was filed, but the judge's time on the bench is quite lengthy. And as you know, the same thing's true with felonies. Some misdemeanors, but felony cases certainly have multiple days in court that require a judge, and yet it's only reflected one time.
Follow.
Thank you, sir. And the constitutional requirement for an associate judge to be in every county, is that something that would be worth looking at, changing that? I mean, what would your thoughts be on that, given that, as you mentioned, some rural counties?
I think it's really hard for a county that may be 45 miles away, depending on where county seats are and where an associate judge would be located. It's really hard to try to figure out, are you going to spend more in mileage sending that judge on a 100-mile round trip each day to have to go answer to those who get arrested, or again, those emergency hearings. Now, in terms of scheduling cases that have hearings that are farther along, it's usually those initial court appearances that have those timelines and that require that immediacy. But I think that's why you see in in western Oklahoma so few district judges, is because the realization is there that the associates can handle the caseload mostly, but when they're doing the preliminary hearing, we either have to have the district judge come in and do the felony trial, or an associate from another county get assigned over if they did not participate in the preliminary hearing. So there's some sharing of that back and forth that allows us to administer with fewer district judges in those less populated areas.
Representative McCulley, recognized.
Thank you. I have a question on that, and then one unrelated follow-up. On that question, if the legislature were to take up the constitutional issue of a district per county to provide more flexibility with staffing, could you see technology perhaps playing a role in the use of teleconferencing, and perhaps even in the use of a greater use of associates or special judges filling these spots as circuit judges, as often really happens now, practically speaking, in the case in a lot of your western districts?
I think that's possible in some respects. Certainly the court's technology is getting there. I would not be able to tell you whether or not the county court or the county sheriffs in some of those areas are set up like some of our more metropolitan counties are, where they can do initial appearances either from, down in the sheriff's area or someplace. So it may be one way, but I'm not sure that it's available two ways. But there would be time to find that out and ascertain that. As most of you that have studied this are aware, our associate district judges are the 77 former county judges. And so when the court moved to, when the state moved to this district system, the 77 county judges that gave ownership of each county for having a judge turned into the title associate district judge and gave them the same jurisdictional authority as a district judge.
This is my second question. It's not related, but you mentioned earlier that Cleveland County judges take about 1,400 cases per, and again, that doesn't necessarily reflect how many cases they're actually handling.
Correct.
Because of the Canadian. I apologize. All right, Cleveland. I'm sorry about that. Canadian. I apologize. Canadian, and that we're considering taking Mulkey, who appears to have about 1,100 per judge of their 4. You do the simple math. Looking just on that same page, if you divide McCurtain, they've got 4 into about 3,000. Marshall, 2 into about 1,500, which should leave about 750. Garvin, 3 into about 3,000, about 1,000. Atoka, 2 into about 14. The point being, you've got other counties here that appear to have lesser caseloads even than Okmulgee County per judge. Why Okmulgee County that appears to have at least a somewhat comparable caseload? It's in the ballpark, so to speak, as the one as the county that we're talking about. Why select them for deselecting a district judge relative to some of the other counties that seem to actually have a lesser caseload per district judge?
Some of those counties that you mentioned, not all of them, but some of them are counties that are pretty much just an associate district judge. So they are single judge counties. McCurtain County, I know, has 2 special judges.
Those are judges total.
Yeah. And they have, but in Okmulgee County, there was a vacancy created by retirement. And so it was the same situation as Seminole County. And as we visited the court, and I know the Chief Justice made a trip to Okmulgee to talk to the other district judge that was there and visit with him about this. And conversation was also had with Senator Thompson so that he would be aware of what was happening. So you cannot, a judge has really a vested interest in a position as long as they are holding that position. So the opportunity in a county, I mean, just because we have vacancies in Oklahoma County didn't mean we were going to take those vacancies, because clearly those counties need to, this county has to have their vacancies filled to maintain a decent caseload. So it's sometimes it's when the stars align and you have someone who retires in a county with multiple district judges, and it gives you that chance to see if the resources are being used best.
Follow up?
Well, I've got a good segue follow-up then on that. Back during session then, well, thank you, that was an excellent answer. That's exactly what I was looking for, is find why we were looking at Okmulgee. We had discussed, it had been, the subject had been raised, if we might have a judge retiring out of Pawnee County, and we have a little bit of an unusual situation where you have a rural county connected to a metro with one judge, a district judge, and if in fact that were to happen, would that then create that opportunity, perhaps merge a rural county with a rural county, thereby leaving Tulsa as its own metro and creating more of a synergy there between a couple of rural counties and restructuring that. I do know that was a specific issue that we had discussed during session. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that, or if the court had a chance to discuss that specific issue further.
What has been discussed with me is a reminder that even though Canadian County is a separate judicial district, it is with Oklahoma County for a judicial administrative district. And the example of having Judge Miller's retirement in Canadian County, the partnering of Oklahoma County has allowed those resources to be available to help the adjoining county while they're down a judge. The same is what I recall the judges that came and talked last spring during session, The same thing is true with Tulsa County. If there's a disqualification in Pawnee County, the resources of Tulsa County are available to help cover what is needed in Pawnee County, and that's not always true when you pair up rural counties just together just because you think they go together because they're rural. Sometimes there are other reasons that a rural county may stand alone.
So just to clarify, Governor, not only do you have the caseload situation in Canadian, you also have a judge retiring, and so you're having to funnel resources from another county?
Yes.
Right. Representative Loring, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor, I'm a little bit confused. I may have missed it when you said that. Are you specifically asking us to look at making this transition of the one judicial slot from the one county to the other?
Representative, I'm not asking that. I'm letting you know that it is my belief that the Chief Justice is going to make that recommendation in his annual letter to the governor and the legislature.
Okay.
Follow up.
Thank you. And since if that were to happen, we would be talking about reducing by one the judges in one judicial district and increasing by one in another judicial district, but we're not talking about a realignment of the districts.
No, sir.
So what is it that we, the legislature, would do?
What they did the last time when it was Seminole County and it was moved to Cleveland County, there was specific language in the section of law that references the district judges in Seminole County, and it referenced a specific office, 1 or 2 or whatever, that would be moved, and then the language that referenced Cleveland County was amended to show the effective date that position would become open.
Okay.
Follow up.
Thank you. Aside from this one transaction that we anticipate you are going to ask for, is there any discussion about any other judicial realignment out there?
Not that I've heard.
Okay.
I would tell you that we have looked at the caseloads, but in terms of changing the lines of judicial districts, that is not something that the court has instructed to me that they are considering.
Governor, just so I'm clear, the options, and we're talking about the Canadian County situation, but just logistically, with any time you have this situation, there are 2 different tracks. So the legislature could get involved, and I believe you said if we got involved, took legislative action, we go through the JNC, you could fill it within, say, 6 months to a year. But the other route, having an election, does the legislature have to be involved in that situation, or is that completely within the bounds of the court?
No, sir. I believe that it depends upon the effective date that you set that new position in Canadian County. I think that can be controlled by statute. The effective, I don't remember, Judge Balkman may remember, the position in Cleveland County, I think, just happened to fall at a time where an election came up. Is that correct?
The legislature chose to make it elective.
Yeah, the legislature chose to make it effective a year, whatever the time frame was, and I don't remember, so I don't know if the judicial election cycle was closer in time, but that was what was done.
So if the legislature felt that the need was there and it was time sensitive, we could act. Otherwise, if you want it to happen, it could. It would just, at this point in time, we wouldn't have a judge there until January 2019. Is that accurate?
I would tell you, I think the legislature controls the timing.
Okay. Any other members have any questions? Representative Biggs?
Thank you, sir. And a follow-up to Representative McCullough's question about the convenience of having a rural district with a rural county with the Tulsa County. That's just more of a convenience. I mean, those resources would be available to any judicial district. So say, for example, Grady County, all the judges in that district recuse. They have resources available to pull a judge from Lawton, even though they're not the same administrative
Yeah, but now you're talking
district.
a lot, and you're not talking Oklahoma County. And the resources that are available in a county that has pool secretary bailiffs and pool court reporters to be able to go cover if someone's sick or out and not able to come or on vacation doesn't really exist in those other counties.
Follow.
But the simple fact is, if a judicial district needs extra help, there's a process in place for them to receive that help from neighboring districts, just not out of mere convenience.
Yes, and we're doing that all the time. I take assignment orders if a judge recuses and is not able to handle a case, and if it's the presiding judge, then that assignment comes up to the Chief Justice to make the assignment. Otherwise, the 9 presiding judges of the administrative districts are in charge of that within their own districts, which is what I think Judge Flanagan's been handling a couple of cases in Grady County with Van Dyke's retirement.
Governor, how many, in the state, how many current judicial vacancies do we have?
Currently, today, unless somebody has announced they're going to retire, I believe that we have 5 vacancies that are being considered by the nominating commission. 3 have already had the deadline closed October 7th, I think, for the district judge vacancies in Oklahoma County, in Grady Caddo County is 1, and Canadian County. Since those opened, or actually now the advertising is going on and applications being accepted for the vacancy that will be created December 31 by the retirement of Justice Taylor, and also the vacancy created in Oklahoma County by the moving of District Judge Swinton to the Oklahoma Court of Civil Appeals.
When last year, as soon as I can remember, we were discussing the budget, you had some vacancies, but you froze them, chose not to fill them, obviously because you didn't know what your budget was look like. So how many, are there any vacancies that have been open for a significant amount of time?
And I'm glad you said that because I did misspeak. I was thinking in terms of the elected positions. I have at least 2 special judge vacancies that have not been filled from retirements yet. I anticipate that will occur within a month or so. But from a judge standpoint, we have still been holding the special judge vacancies as well as court reporters and secretary bailiffs positions open, generally a minimum of 30 days and oftentimes longer, depending upon how much additional money the court is having to pay for accrued leave.
Representative McCullough, recognized.
Just one last question. I would imagine Judge Blaine and perhaps others may want to chip in on the specific issue of Pawnee, since I know there are those that want to talk about it. But and again, if you cannot or do not feel comfortable asking the question, if the legislature, sui generis, chose to take up the issue of pairing off Pawnee from Tulsa, do you feel that that the court could, with the resources available, add on its own initiative a special judge to the existing district? Or, you know, obviously we could go ahead and tell you to add an associate there if that was our choice. But if we went ahead and collapsed that in, would you feel would the court have enough resources to go ahead and add a special to take up those 1,700 cases?
No, sir. We don't have the funds to be able to add a special judge anywhere in the state right now.
Representative Biggs.
Final question. Thank you, sir. I know you've sat in our seats. You know, we go through redistricting every 10 years. Senators go through it every 10 years. Can you tell us when the last time the judicial districts went through the redistricting similar to what the legislature goes through?
I honestly do not know. I do know that at least in about 2003 or 4, we made some changes in western Oklahoma, or maybe that was the DA's district that we moved in. So I know that I have no knowledge of when it occurred, but I haven't been involved in that in a long enough time that What I would say to you is in response this way. I don't know when they last changed, but I was unaware that the Chief Justice is required annually to look at the districts and to make a determination whether or not districts should be altered, and that recommendation or a statement, yes or no, occurs annually in his report to the governor and legislative leaders. So I don't know when they've changed, but I do know that annually the Chief Justice has the authority to look and make that recommendation.
Representative Watson.
From the perspective of a generalist, I guess I do wonder about population changes. And I've lived in Oklahoma all my life, lived in Duncan, Oklahoma when I was a boy, when Halliburton was headquartered in Duncan, Oklahoma.
The good old days.
You bet. Lived in Ada, Oklahoma, back many years ago. So I've lived in smaller communities, and I've seen changes that have occurred in those communities. I know, and ups and downs. I'm just curious if in this whole process there is some consideration of population and what has been happening. I think there are some areas where we have seen continuing lowering of population and increases in population in certain areas. And obviously that's going to change over time, but just generally the consideration of population and gets kind of back into, I guess, the, looking at what we do in the legislature as well.
I would tell you, I think, yes, indeed, and 15 years ago, the new positions that were being added were often being added up around Rogers County, and as the growth outside moved east and northeast of Tulsa. And so that's where I saw additional judicial positions being added, just like I think there have been, the second special judge has been added in Canadian County since I left the legislature, as we watch the growth from Oklahoma County no longer moving as much south as it is moving west and north. I think that's why you see us making the recommendation for a move to Canadian County, and understanding that we are keeping an eye on Logan County because we think it's going to be busting soon.
Any members have any questions? All right, Governor Askins, we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you, members.
All right, district attorneys, who's all right?
At least to start. I'll do handouts now, or provide them afterwards. It's all the PowerPoint that you all are about to look at, so I can provide them to everyone afterwards. Thank you, members. My name is Suzanne McLean-Atwood. I am Executive Coordinator at the District Attorney's Council, and I do want to thank you for this opportunity. I first have to say thank you to those of you who attended our event this morning. This is the 35th year of the Victims Compensation Program, Victims Bill of Rights in Oklahoma. It's our 35th anniversary today. Great event today, so thank you to those who were able to attend with us today. Really appreciate your participation. As I get started, it says Oklahoma District Attorneys, and we've got a number of them in the room here, and you all may not know those people, so let me just introduce them very quickly. Angela Marcy from Weatherford, Chris Boring from Woodward, Emily Redmond from Durant, Brian Hermanson from Ponca City, Kevin Buchanan from Bartlesville, and over there, Rex Duncan from Pawhuska. Two other of our members, many of you know Mike Fields, my current chairman. He is the DA. He's from Enid, has a 5-county district out in western Oklahoma. He is preparing for a murder case that starts Monday, and his ME could only meet today, this afternoon, so he sends his regrets. As well as Rob Barris, who is currently in a murder trial this week, so he also sends his regrets. So what I've done today is hopefully not baffle you with too much information, but what we did when we learned about this study, Trent and I sat down and thought, what kind of information would we want to look at if we were looking at the DA districts? And so I've got about 20 slides that will go very quickly, though, that will kind of just show you a bunch of maps, different ways to look at the DA's districts in the state of Oklahoma. I'm going to start with talking about the history just a little bit, counties by population, by land area, by caseload, and finally staffing and budget. I promise it will go quickly. It sounds like a lot, but I promise it will go quickly. So there are 27 district attorneys. You just heard from Governor Askins. There are 26 judicial districts. There are 27 district attorney districts in the state of Oklahoma. They were created back in 1965 when we too came over from the county system. So we had a county attorney system back then, and the legislature at the time decided that's when we wanted to begin funding a state-funded system and try to begin to professionalize the system. So the district attorney's districts were created. The only amendment we have had, I anticipated your question, was back in 2001 when 2 of our districts agreed to switch a county. That's what Governor Askins was referring to a moment ago. 2 of our districts in western Oklahoma, there was a 4-county district and a 6-county district, and it didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, and so they agreed, and they came to the legislature, and we actually had an amendment. And that resulted in, this is what our districts look like today, along with the district attorneys that serve in each of those areas. And again, I'm leaving you with all these maps, so you don't have to write all this down. You'll have copies to take with you. These are the current DAs, many of whom you just saw. So let's start with counties. And this was actually interesting, Representative Kennedy. I will tell you, I hadn't looked at this in these terms. How many districts have 5 counties? How many have 2? So this was really an interesting exercise for Trent and I think we learned a lot as we went through this. All of our districts now with that amendment have anywhere from 1 to 5 counties. So our largest districts have 5 counties. And this shows you the breakdown of that. So we have three districts that have only 1 county, Oklahoma, Tulsa, and Muskogee, all the way down to 5 counties that have 5 county districts. The largest, as you can see, are the 2-county districts. They're in the middle. And just to give you a visual picture, we color-coded this map just so you can see how that breaks out. So as you can see, of course, many of our western districts are large. That's not where the bulk of the population is. So you can see many of them have 5 counties, them along with Craig Ladd down in Ardmore, who also has 5 counties. Our 4-county districts, you see those 3, the one in eastern Oklahoma over here, Jason Hicks and Mike Boring. And then, of course, 2-county districts, those are the largest group of districts we have. Interestingly, I will point something out to you because until Mike Fields said it one day, I hadn't realized this. But between Mike Fields, who has District 4, and Jason Hicks, who has District 6, they go from Kansas to Texas. Those 2 districts go all the way from Kansas to Texas. So very large landmass, in addition to both of them have relatively high population numbers.
Ms. Atwood, can I interrupt you?
You certainly may.
And I apologize. Can we just get the handout so we can keep up? I should have said that before we started, so.
I'm sorry, I should have already given them to you, Josh. Probably be easier to make notes on those, wouldn't it?
Sometimes it's an eye chart, so it's easier to look at it. Please continue.
It's a lot of numbers.
Yeah.
It is a lot of information. And just stop me anytime I'm giving too much, too, because we didn't really know what you all would like to look at. Okay, so that's our county breakdown. This will shift now. We're on page 4 of these handouts. We'll shift to population. So our population numbers range anywhere from 31,555. Can you guess where that is? In the Panhandle. Our very smallest population district, to 675,000, which is here in Oklahoma County, District Attorney David Prater's district. This number was interesting to me. I had never sat down to see how many have less than 100,000 population. More than half the districts have less than 100,000 population, 17 of our districts. And I have actually broken that down for you as well. Interestingly, the largest group are our districts from 60 to 100,000. And a visual map. This is listed, and your legend there on the side is listed in order of highest population to lowest population, so you can take a look at those numbers. I know, I didn't bring enough copies for you guys to see. And then finally, one more visual. This map is color-coded by population size. So the blue districts are the smallest population districts, less than 60,000 people. The green are the next, then the red. The 2 counties that have 200 to 500,000 population, which would be Greg Mashburn down in Norman and his 2 counties, and then Mike Fields, who we've already referenced. And then, of course, our 2 metro areas, Tulsa and Oklahoma County. You can thank Trent and his little calculator for the next number, because we looked at land area. When we sat down and started looking at the districts, we thought, what makes geographical sense? And Angela had already told us that her district is larger than how many? 3 different states? so Trent took a look at that and actually summarized that for you so you can see how our districts line up with regard to land mass. And then finally, another population listing. That's your county population listing so that you would have access to that if you had specific questions about that. Moving on to caseload, I need to echo on what Jerry said. We also excluded traffic cases. We do have our traffic numbers, but we excluded traffic cases from our numbers because, like she said, we thought that might not be an accurate representation of everything they do. And our caseload numbers also, let me give you the caveat, are 2015 filings of new cases. So I don't know if her numbers were cases filed or actual caseload sitting on their desks. Filed cases. So what's important about that number for both entities is that it's filed cases, it's new cases these judges or these DAs are taking on, in addition to the existing caseload that sits on their desk. You all are all aware that many cases are not resolved within 1 year. So those cases are also still sitting on the desk. So all of these case numbers are in addition to whatever has not been disposed of from the year before. In Oklahoma, each prosecutor averages 359 new cases each year. New cases. We currently have 324 prosecutors in the state, and bear in mind I included DAs. As you just heard me mention, in Oklahoma, our district attorneys carry caseloads. These district attorneys, I'm looking back through here, each and every one of these district attorneys carry an active caseload. Rex is over there nodding his head. So I included the DAs in our numbers because without them being in the office, they truthfully carry a caseload just like it. And it varies on how they do that. Each DA manages his team, manages his staff load a little bit differently, but each of them carry an active caseload. This shows you the number of felonies and misdemeanors filed, and I'm going very quickly, so you feel free to stop me at any time. I'm trying to get through this, and then I'll be happy to answer questions. And then remember that I'm excluding traffic from these 359 cases. And the other piece I wanted you to be aware of that is excluded when we go through these numbers are things that take a lot of time, but they don't reflect in caseload. And you just talked about that with Jerry and the judges. I've listed a few of those here. Traffic dockets, declines, so the cases that we review that law enforcement bring over and we don't file any charges on, but yet we've taken time to assess that case, go through intake, and try to figure out whether there is a fileable case. All pending cases that are not reflected, truancy courts, and time spent on drug courts, mental health, veterans, other programs, and child support. Many of you serve on our appropriations subcommittee or have in the past, and you probably remember me saying, people ask what's the big deal about drug court. We actually did an analysis about 4 years ago, and what we tried to analyze, what kind of time commitment does a drug court take? And we did an analysis that showed if an offender pleads guilty to a drug offense, this prosecutor will likely touch that case about 5 times. 5 times they're touching that case, going to court, handling various hearings. If instead that offender goes to drug court, the same prosecutor will touch that file 57 times. 57 different times to go through drug court. That's true for us, that's true for the courts, that's certainly true for the juvenile cases that were referenced earlier as well. The other piece that I think you all would be very surprised to know how little time many of your prosecutors have to do things that you would expect them to do, like this, leaving insufficient time for legal review, meeting with victims, and case preparation. I know many of our assistant DAs, interestingly, I spoke with an attorney who had been in the Oklahoma County DA's office and went to the U.S. Attorney's office, and I asked him how he was liking it, and he said, Suzanne, he said, I really miss the hands-on work I get to do with the victims and the people, but he said, I've got 1 arson case in 5 weeks. He said, I can actually prepare. I can meet with my victims. And so it was just a completely different environment from what he experienced in the local prosecutor's office. Finally, this is a whole bunch of numbers, but I included them because I know you might want to look at them, but those are the caseload numbers that go with those 2015 filings broken down by district. So I'll leave those to you so you can take a look at those. What we finally did, Trent and I sat down and looked at that and said, let's do average cases per prosecutor, because Representative Kennedy had asked me about staffing, so I thought, well, let's collect the numbers on lawyers in the office and then compare those averages, and these are in order of highest average caseload to lowest. Now again, remember, it excludes certain things and it doesn't include active cases, but for the 2015 cases that were filed, these are the numbers. And I'll be happy to go into any details you all want on that. This is a visual just showing how our various DAs are staffed. And then finally, Representative Kennedy asked me to talk about budget a little bit. You all have heard me say over and over and over again that you all provide less than half of the money that the district attorneys have to run their offices. Our new percentage is 45.3%. We keep going down just a percent every year. State appropriations fund 45.3% of the DA's budgets, and the remainder they must generate themselves through self-generated revenue sources. Grants, county funds, bogus check funds, supervision, 991 costs, all those other funding sources that make them business managers as opposed to just prosecutors. They are generating those funds to run their office. Their budgets are reflected on the next two slides. I couldn't fit it all in one. And the columns you see there, that looks like a lot of information, but this basically, the FY17 appropriation number is how much state appropriations they get, and then the next number is how much they are pumping in through all those self-generated revenue sources. And then finally their total budget. And that's a whole lot of information in a few minutes, so I'm happy to go back into any details you had or questions you may have, as well as any questions you may have for any of them.
Thank you. Appreciate it. That's a lot of good information, and now I know that Trent is a math nerd. That's always good to know. So.
Don't know what I'd do without him.
I did notice that in the numbers you provided us before, you did provide the traffic numbers, and it looks like we want to stay out of DA District 4, so Mike Field's district. You don't want to speed in because the traffic numbers are like 3 times any other district. So I'll just go ahead and start off because this is going to be the looming question. I know this came about last year, and that's dealing with district, whatever Muskogee is. What's the district number for Muskogee?
15.
15. So as I look at 15, and we'll go back to District 4. And District 4, Mr. Fields' district has how many counties? I know it has a lot.
He has 5 counties.
And so he has 5 counties, and he has a budget of about $4 million. And so you have Muskogee County sitting by itself, and it has a budget of 1.6, 1.7 million. So he's running 5 counties, which I know is an absorbent expense to have to staff 5 different counties. If by those numbers, if District 15 were 5 counties, the budget would be significantly larger than in District 4. So, because I know all the members are going to have questions, so I might as well open the door. Can you just talk about why Muskogee is one district by itself, and then mathematically, from a budget perspective, why it should or shouldn't be?
First answer is I don't know. I was not here in 1965. I know I've been around a long time, but I was not
Fair
here
enough.
in 1965. Of course, there's been speculation. Was that political? How did that get established? Who was sitting at the table when Muskogee was carved out as a single county district? The same question could be asked about a couple of the judicial districts, which seem to be single county as well. So I don't know why it was carved out. What I do know is that every DA district is different. So you're asking about budget. Orville-Loge in Muskogee, as an example, has a task force. Mike Fields does not. He chooses not to run one. They have a lot of effective law enforcement there, so he chooses not to run a task force. So part of Orville's budget would encompass the $300,000 or $400,000 he has to run a task force out of his office. So every DA district is going to have differing budget items, and we can provide all of that detail so you can see which areas and which categories they all tend to fund in. As Trent and I looked at those numbers, I will tell you, Representative, I was surprised at the caseload numbers for Muskogee, the felony filings for a 70-county district, 70-county population, 70,000 population. Their felony filings are significantly higher. So that's one thing I think the members should be aware of. Recognize when you look at total caseload is not indicative of workload. So let me break that down just a little bit. Muskogee's felony filings or Oklahoma County's felony filings, a felony case clearly is going to take a lot more time than a simple misdemeanor case. Likewise, a homicide or a murder case is going to take a lot more time than a general felony case. Contrast that also to one of our 5 county districts over here where Angela or Chris have, you all know, I believe, that one of the duties you task our district attorneys with is representing their county government. 5 counties, 3 county commissioners, 15 county commissioners she's dealing with, 15 county commissioners he's dealing with, in addition to all the county officers. So every DA district has a little bit different workload that won't be reflected in those caseload numbers.
The amendment in 2001, the agreement, can you remind me again how many counties and what the situation was there?
Yes, District 2 up there on the map in the western part of the state had, which county, Angela? Kiowa. I'm trying to remember now. Yes, they had Kiowa County, and District 3 was just had Washington. Well, then that wouldn't be right. Oh, they just traded. Obviously, I don't know the answer. I will be happy to look that up for you. If Trent would hit 19 OS 215, it would tell you.
Well, I guess the question is, 2001 wasn't that long ago, so we've had some movement recently. And so if it was by agreement, and it obviously seemed to make sense, and you had some disparity, because you do have disparity. I mean, when you compare Mr. Fields, who has 5 counties, and you still have 1 county out there by itself, and we're taking out Tulsa and Oklahoma because they're just gargantuan compared to the rest. Has there been any discussions about doing the same thing now and addressing Muskogee sitting out there by itself? Because obviously the legislature doesn't necessarily have to get involved and come up with something. We would obviously love the opportunity for you to go back to 2001 and dust those books off and figure out how you did it before.
Well, it was raised by those 2 DAs at the time. They were working with the county officials, the county officers, and those 2 DAs thought it made more sense at that time to do that. And I don't know what the rationale was, but those 2 DAs got together and decided that made more sense. To answer your question, no, we have not dusted that off because I believe the district attorneys around the room and around the table when we talk about this, we don't think it's broken right now. Now, having said that, you are accurate that there are clearly some disparities. And in fact, when we started talking about it, you referenced Mike Fields. If I look at that district and that population and that county mass and that filing, honestly, we need another DA out there. But I didn't think you'd let me ask for one. So, seriously, I don't see how you shrink districts. I do see that there could be some where you could split some off. Yes. And honestly, when you ask about Muskogee, I looked at that representative candidate because I know that was something that was pitched last year. And Trent and I really did. We sat down and looked at that and we thought, okay, if you wanted to combine Muskogee with somebody, take a look at it. But then it didn't make a whole lot of sense if it's already 70,000 population-wise, but you've got all these others who have less population. Why would I increase that population size when these DAs would tell you just by continuing to increase their administrative duties, adding more counties, we're just increasing their administrative duties? Why would that make sense? It didn't seem that a 70,000 population district should increase. It seemed like perhaps some of the larger ones should decrease.
Well, you take some of the larger ones, for instance, obviously I'm a Cleveland County legislator, and so I have Greg Mashburn. He has 3 counties. So he's able to function fairly well, and I don't know the population of Cleveland County off the top of my head, but I know it's more than 70,000, significantly more. How much? All right, 340,000. So when you get out in the eastern Oklahoma counties, I understand that 60,000, 70,000 is a lot for eastern Oklahoma. I'm an eastern Oklahoma boy from Pittsburgh County, so I know. But that just didn't seem like a large number. So the question is, and then this is the last question because I know the members probably have other ones. If there was a consideration if the legislature were to consider doing something to consolidate Muskogee in another district or move some of the other counties into Muskogee, is there any recommendations, any discussions about what that would look like if we came to you and said, hey, we're thinking about doing this? What would you like it to look like?
There are no recommendations currently. If you come to me and ask me to do that, we'll bring you some.
Okay. Any other members have any questions? Representative Biggs.
Let me jump up in front of Representative McCullough. Thank you, sir. Ms. Atwood, thank you for being here. Similar questions to what I asked Governor Askins. Do you think the current system with the way the DAs are set up with the 27 DA districts is operating as efficiently as possible right now?
No, because there's not sufficient funding for the DAs to operate efficiently. Having said that, I mean, seriously, you all know I've been over here begging for money. I truly think, I go back to something I said earlier, I think if you went to their offices, and many of you have done that, and you came from an office, you would really be surprised at the lack of time they have to adequately process cases. I think you all expect a certain caliber of representation from your prosecutors' offices, and you also expect us to be able to recruit a certain caliber of prosecutor to those offices. And I'm just going to tell you, I've been here 25 years. That's continuing to deteriorate. I am concerned about it. I see it because I have to train these prosecutors, and so I see the revolving door of prosecutors going in and out. I also see it because I go in and I try to bring in the 8 and 10-year prosecutors to train my other prosecutors, and I don't have them anymore. I have my senior tier of prosecutors, and I have a whole bunch of new people through this revolving door. And so my answer is no, we're not running efficiently right now because of lack of funding. Now, if you're asking me because of the breakdown of the districts, which I think was your question, yes, and here's why. I go back to what I said. Angela is uniquely situated to answer questions to you guys about what it's like to be both in a metro district, because she was an assistant DA in Oklahoma County for how long? 11 years, and she's now the district attorney in Western Oklahoma. And I posed that question to her. I said, tell me about workload. Tell me about workload. I'm trying to learn about the differences. And she could, I'll speak for you for a moment, and then if you have questions of her. But basically, the sweatshop that is Oklahoma County, that is continual cases with very little time for preparation and very little time for meeting with witnesses, and oftentimes walking into a preliminary hearing having never seen your witness, but allowing for specialization so that you're dealing with all drug cases or you're dealing with all sexual assault cases, is very different from Angela's assistant, who is sitting out there trying a murder case today, a drug case tomorrow, a traffic ticket, DUI court, and handling a wide variety of things, along with the county commissioner who walks in and says, I got a dead horse on the side of the road, what do I do? So, I mean, it's a very, very different workload that they see for each district. So I believe that the district attorneys take the money that you all give them, and they generate every other dime they can to try to make their offices work as efficiently as possible.
Follow.
Thank you, sir. And trust me, we know funding. We've discussed that for 4 years while we've been here.
Yes, you have. Thank you.
I want to shift a little bit and talk about redistricting. Same question, the House, Senate, subject to redistricting. Governor Askins couldn't remember last time the courts were, and if you look up, it still has 6 judicial districts that match up when Oklahoma had 6 congressmen. Nothing's happened since then. When was the last time the DA districts went through a redistricting similar to what the House and Senate members go through?
They have not.
Representative Watson, recognized.
Again, a question from a generalist here, having been in your position for 25 years. I'm just curious if you have had the opportunity to see perhaps what other states do when they are looking at the district attorney districts, how they do that. Obviously, there's need from time to time for change for different reasons. Even DAs agree with that. Granted, money would help everything, and I agree with you there. I'm not, and I understand that. I'm looking more at what our responsibility may be here. One of the things we do find that happens when we go through gut-wrenching economic type positions is looking at things like this. And so I'm just curious if perhaps in 25 years you have seen something in other states that you think might be exemplary or might be a way for us to look at this in terms of how do we assess, how do we process this? Is there something you've seen that might be intriguing for us to look at?
I'd like you to emulate Tennessee and give them 8-year terms. No, seriously. That's an interesting question because Arkansas, right next door to us, has 28 DA districts. And similar to us, they have all of them ranging, they range in very, very different dynamics, just like we do. Some of them don't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And it's a good question in that now that you ask that question, I don't hear any of my colleagues in other states talking about redistricting either. It's of DAs. I think what's happened in Oklahoma is not unusual and not unique. I don't think that has happened a lot. Now, let me say this. I was asked to go to our counterparts in Missouri. So if you look at the state, all the states, there are not, I'd have to go back and get you an answer on how many have district attorneys, because a number of them still have county attorneys. Missouri is one of those. Arizona is one of those. Colorado is a district attorney system. New Mexico is a district attorney system. So we could actually create you another map of that if you would like, Representative Watson. Having said that, Missouri asked me to come forward because they were looking at doing district attorney districts. Now, their issues were more, how do we do the funding? How do we do the dividing up of the funding? Not how do we consolidate districts? So I was not involved in those discussions, but they have actually looked at a district attorney plan, and they might be someone we could look at to see what factors make sense.
Representative Pfeiffer, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a quick question about populations. When you were doing these maps and figuring these things out and breaking these down by populations, did we do any factoring in for like transitory population, like OSU and Payne County? They're technically not residents, but there's a whole lot of students that come into Stillwater every year. Sure, I wouldn't be one of them back in my day, but several of them cause trouble. Does that have any influence on, did you factor that in when you were doing the populations on these districts?
No, we didn't take into account what the transient population was. These were just off the
Census Bureau.
Off the, I don't remember what, it was a government website.
Census Bureau.
Population numbers are.
But it's interesting you asked that question, because let me follow up. You all previously had a staffing formula in the Oklahoma State statutes. And interestingly, and you repealed it, we asked you to fund it and you repealed it. It wasn't fully funded, and so you actually repealed it. But in that funding formula included universities, it included mental health institutions, inpatient mental health institutions, and included correctional facilities, and it included military bases. So those are areas which you recognized there may be some impact on the caseloads of prosecutors.
I have a question about salaries. So I think we all know, now we have a lot of attorneys in the room, but we go to school for quite some time and then we have to take that crazy exam. But what is the average salary for your assistant district attorneys compared to police officers or other areas? How does that compare to, someone's looking to becoming one of your ADAs?
Current starting salary is about $45,000 a year. Average overall salary is about $65,000 a year. We did a comparison a few years ago where we learned that OBN agents, OSPI agents, at starting level make more than starting prosecutors. We also learned that troopers, and I want to say, Karen would have to help me, but I think it was at year 7, are making about $70,000, and the average prosecutor in Oklahoma makes about $65,000. Now that does stair step up. I mean, I say it stair steps up if they again fund according to the budget that they have. So you're going to have some senior prosecutors who will make, in the 80s, but those are few and far between.
And what's the average time that you're able to hang on to ADAs before they go find a better paying job?
Our turnover was 70% when we last looked at it. Here's what I think they would tell you. We're able to recruit people early because of the experience they're going to get in their offices. They're in the courtroom all the time. So we are able to recruit young lawyers, get them in there, and then what typically happens is at year 4 or 5, you're looking at, okay, I could go out to a private firm, make significantly more money, and not have this kind of a workload, so we lose them at about 4 or 5. Once we get them past, y'all tell me if I'm accurate, once we get them past 8 to 10, then they've kind of made a career decision, I think.
Well, I practice all over, and it seems like they get younger and younger every time, or maybe I'm just getting older. I don't know. One or the other.
No, I agree with you.
Any members have Representative Perriman?
Which retirement system do DAs and assistant DAs, what do they
Assistant
participate in?
DAs are on OPRS, so they're on the same public employee retirement system that the other state agencies are on, DHS and everyone. DAs themselves are on the elected official retirement within OPRS.
Follow up.
Follow.
So any of your new hires are subject to the defined contribution?
Yes, sir.
Rather than defined benefit?
Yes, sir. Which I'm also concerned as a recruiting tool.
Any other members have any other questions? All right. Appreciate you answering the hard questions. I know I asked a lot of them, but I got them out there, and so it's over. So we have some time left, about 37 minutes. Does anybody else have any other burning desires to speak about any particular these particular issues? I don't want to talk about the whiteboard. I have a new term. Instead of being waterboarded, my first 2 years in the legislature, I was whiteboarded. So, but we will miss Representative McCullough. There's no question. All right. Does any other members have anything? All right. Well, I appreciate everyone coming and your presentation. At this time, we're adjourned.